The Callisto Protocol was released over a year and a half ago in December of 2022 and was set to be a spiritual successor to the Dead Space franchise. The Callisto Protocol would be directed by Glenn Schofield, the creative director of the first Dead Space, who also worked on the campaigns for Call of Duty Advanced Warfare and World War II. We should have known. Funny enough, Josh Duhamel, the main character in the Callisto Protocol, who most of you will recognize from Michael Bay's Transformers movies, also starred in Call of Duty World War II, which makes the Callisto Protocol the second game that Glenn and Josh worked on together. Ahead of its holiday release, there was a lot of hype surrounding the game. First and foremost, the game's visuals looked absolutely incredible, and instead of the Callisto Protocol being released on 2 generations of consoles like many other games before and since, the game would be released exclusively on the next-gen series of consoles, as well as PC. This made gamers excited, assuming that the developers wouldn't have to hold the visuals and gameplay back in order to release on outdated hardware.
Why your PlayStation sound sick? Nah, we good, bruh. It just be doing this on the loading screen. Alright. Bro, you sure everything alright? Don't worry, bruh. It do this every day.
Additionally, the Dead Space franchise, specifically the first 2 games, are some of the most beloved horror titles of all time. However, the last Dead Space game, Dead Space 3, was released in 2013, which means fans were hungry for a new survival game set in space. Luckily enough for fans, not only could they look forward to the Callisto Protocol that was releasing just in time for Christmas, they could also look forward to the highly anticipated remake of the original Dead Space that would release the following month in January of 2023. This certainly forced the newly formed developers of the Callisto Protocol, Striking Distance Studios, to release their game first. Looking back now, it's obvious that it would have been in the studio's best interest to delay the release of the Callisto Protocol.
This was the last game of the year that I was extremely excited for. I've been looking forward to this release since the first trailer came out, so of course I got it on launch day, and it reminded me that I'm a fucking idiot for expecting a modern game to work on launch. My god, I got this on PC, and what a tough pill to swallow it was to learn that I was once again bamboozled because the fucking performance was terrible. Playing this game out of the box on Steam on day 1 was almost unplayable. The stuttering was unlike anything I'd seen before. It was like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but in space. Every time you would turn a corner going down a new corridor, you'd have a frame drop from 60 to like 5. Or just a complete freeze in like a full hiccup until it regained consciousness and let you move a couple more steps before stuttering again.
Before the release of the Callisto Protocol, I was interested in playing the game, but once it released with performance issues on the same level as Cyberpunk, I didn't bat an eye, and after a few months I completely forgot that this game existed. That was until the game was added to Gamepass a few weeks ago, and to my surprise I saw that there had been post-launch content released for the game, like a story expansion titled The Final Transmission, which I have never heard about prior, and with it being almost 2 years since the game was released, I assumed that the game would now be in a playable state. I booted up the game on PC and went to the graphics settings to customize them. I have an RTX 3070, so I set most of the graphics settings to high and turned on ray tracing. The game gives you an option to test your graphics settings, which launches a real-time rendering of the game and allows you to see what your game will look like and most importantly how it will run. Which comes in handy because once you start the Callisto Protocol, you will have to quit to the main menu if you would like to change your graphics settings. Once I started the campaign for Callisto Protocol, I was honestly pretty impressed and excited for what the game had in store. First of all, this game easily has the best graphics that I have ever seen, with believably realistic facial animations, flawless textures, and insane levels of detail in both the interior environments as well as the outdoor ones. Not only was I hooked on the visuals, but in the beginning I was hooked on the story too. The story in the Callisto Protocol is pretty lackluster and is almost non-existent for most of the game. However, the introduction is pretty immersive thanks to the visuals and cinematics. It starts off with our introduction to our main character, Jacob Lee, and his co-pilot, who I honestly don't remember his name. They're transporting cargo to one of Jupiter's moons, Callisto, through a dangerous area of space that has seen a rise in terrorist attacks. You take control of Jacob, check on your cargo, and do a security sweep of the ship, for when you know it, Jacob discovers that they have been boarded by space pirates.
The outer way? Yeah, I'm guessing.
You end up making it back to the cabin, where Jacob sees one of the Asian terrorists who we just saw a few minutes earlier on a news report. Jacob opens the hatch to the cargo bay, launching the terrorists into space, but one of them shoots the glass out of the door to the cabin, exposing Jacob and his co-pilot. The first red flag of this game is when you are forced to crawl your way back to your seat, and the footage you're seeing is sped up. It takes utterly too long, and it's not engaging in the slightest, as you hold forward and watch Jacob slowly make his way back. Obviously, their ship ends up crashing into Callisto, and since Jacob has main character syndrome, he survives, but things don't look as good for his co-pilot.
Jacob? Jacob? Oh, I didn't listen.
Jacob is then greeted by security droids and a man whose name is Ferris, played by the highly talented and recognizable actor Sam Witwer. The Callisto Moon serves as a prison. More specifically, it's the home of Black Iron Prison, in which Ferris is the head captain and only answers to one, the warden. The security droids discover that the Asian terrorists survived the crash as well, and Ferris is familiar with who she is. Jacob pleads his innocence and says that his ship was attacked by Danny, but Ferris isn't listening as he has orders from the warden to incarcerate both Danny and Jacob. If you haven't noticed by now, you will soon find out that Black Iron Prison does not care about human rights violations.
That device! No! No! You're a goddamn doctor!
Yes, and I intend to faithfully execute my responsibilities. Try not to move, it'll only make things worse.
Oh, fuck you!
Immediately when Jacob wakes up, he discovers that something bad is happening. The prisoners have been released and shit is hitting the fan, but Jacob seizes the moment as an opportunity to escape. He meets a prisoner named Elias who has an escape plan and hands Jacob his first tool, a shiv. This is the moment where I began to have ungodly performance issues. Once Jacob grabbed the shiv, the gameplay went from smooth and stable to consistently choppy. This wasn't just a quick frame drop, the game was permanently stuck at anywhere from 10 to 20 frames a second, and wouldn't return to normal unless I restarted from the previous checkpoint. I don't have footage of this because whenever the game's performance would crap itself, OBS would glitch out and stop recording. Unfortunately, I continued playing the game for an hour, unaware that I wasn't recording any more footage. After restarting from a checkpoint, the game's performance would return back to normal, but only for a few minutes before its performance would soon drop again, causing me to repeat the process over and over until I got fed up and stopped playing for the night. The next time I played the game, I set the graphics to high instead of using my custom ones, and I turned off all the special effects like ray tracing, depth of field, and motion blur. After I made these changes, the issue only occurred one more time throughout the rest of the campaign. Disregarding that, I didn't have any other performance issues besides the occasional glitch, which is a far cry from the state that this game was in when it launched. However, there was one nagging issue that occurred frequently throughout the entire game that I just couldn't solve. The audio would cut out for a few seconds at random points during cutscenes, gameplay moments, and most frustrating of all, dialogue.
End of the line, get up. Dead moon. Shit. As far as anyone else...
Running from what you've done.
This happened so often that I was forced to turn on subtitles if I wanted to make sure I was following conversations. This isn't a game-breaking glitch, but it's really annoying and there should be no excuses for the audio constantly cutting out throughout a 2024 AAA release. There was one moment where I thought I had a game-breaking glitch that almost caused me to quit. When I got to the main menu after launching the game, the list of options was missing the Continue Game button. This caused me to believe that my save data had been corrupted, meaning I was forced to start a new game. I was ready to quit right then and there and move on to something else, but I started a new game, skipped the intro to cutscene, went to the pause menu, and was then able to select my save data from where I left off previously. This was honestly the most terrifying moment in the whole game for me. Even if all the performance issues were fixed in the Callisto Protocol, I think that the best that this game would ever be is only a 7 or 8 out of 10 at most, mainly because both gameplay and story feel underdeveloped and just straight up boring. Let's start with the gameplay, which not only gets repetitive, but ruins the horror experience that they almost perfected. Just like Dead Space, the Callisto Protocol has firearms. There's 5 of them, but that's sort of misleading. Although there are 5 guns, there's only 2 pistols, 2 shotguns, and 1 burst fire assault rifle, with the only difference between the duplicate guns being how fast they shoot and how much damage they do. The lack of weapon variety does play a role in the gameplay being repetitive, but it doesn't help that the actual gunplay itself is nothing to write home about. But having guns and having bad gunplay shouldn't and doesn't affect the horror experience of this game. But there is something that does. See, the Callisto Protocol has melee combat, which is underdeveloped but also ruins the horror in this game. The melee combat in this game involves Jacob dodging left and right to avoid enemy attacks, and then taking a few swings when the biophage are standing still. You'll repeat this process over and over again just to take down one enemy, but pretty soon you get access to a glove that will allow you to control gravity, meaning that you can pick up and launch both enemies and objects. However, it doesn't get too creative, as most of the time you'll pick up enemies and throw them into spikes in order to preserve your ammo and avoid the melee combat. If the Callisto Protocol still hasn't fixed all of its performance issues, and the gameplay can get pretty repetitive too, does the game at least have an interesting story?
Absolutely not!
Well, it does at first, and there was potential to focus on a political conspiracy, but instead that becomes a subplot that you discover in audio logs, and the main focus is on a mining colony that is below the prison. However, barely any time is spent showing what the prison looks like before the outbreak, and too much time is focused on the backstory of the virus, when instead the game should have focused on the conspiracy aspect. Furthermore, the story that we do have isn't really a focus of the game. Majority of the Callisto Protocol is spent trying to escape, and then towards the very end of the game we are thrown a bunch of the exposition and details that should have been spread throughout the entire story. But take my opinion with a grain of salt, because I ended up giving up and not completing the story. I didn't quit on the Callisto Protocol when it acted as if it had corrupted my save files. I didn't quit after hundreds of instances where the audio would glitch out, or after hours of fighting the same reskinned enemies who would end up one-hitting me on full health. But I couldn't finish the main campaign of the Callisto Protocol due to being soft-locked out of the ending. In the final chapter, after waking up in Jacob's cell, players will be forced into a boss fight with one of the two-headed monsters, which is a reused boss that I had defeated at multiple points during the campaign. You'll have to deal a bunch of damage to them, which will end up stunning them, giving you time to use your baton. This starts the second phase of the boss, where one of the heads gets ripped off and you're left to deal with the final one. However, for this boss in the last chapter, I ended up running out of ammo, and you're incapable of using your baton against them. When I respawned, the game also spawned in some extra ammo and health in the room before the boss fight, but I ended up dying before I could use all of it. This time when I loaded up from the checkpoint, the game spawned less ammo than before, meaning I then ran out of ammo and died. I then got stuck in a pattern of dying, restarting, and then looking to see if the game would give me enough ammo to potentially beat this boss. I even found that if you would lead the boss into a tight corner, it would shorten the length you travel in your dodge, allowing you to sneak in a melee attack. But the timing was so short that I ended up giving up on the game because I didn't come to play Dark Souls. I probably would have tried longer to beat the two-headed boss, but in the hallway right before the boss fight, there's a loot crate. But instead, it's a big fuck you from the developers that has a parasite in it that whittles down some of your health. Yeah, there's no fucking gear in the loot crate that's placed right before a boss encounter. I don't regret giving up on the Callisto Protocol's main campaign. However, I do wish I was able to experience the story DLC expansion on my own. In the Callisto Protocol's ending, Jacob and Danny discover that there's only one escape pod, and Jacob sacrificed himself in order for Danny to escape. However, the final transmission DLC takes place directly after this ending, where we see Jacob try to escape the prison one last time. Now, since I didn't finish the main campaign, I watched a summary video of the DLC, and from what I've seen, I really like the ending. Turns out, Jacob died at the end of the main campaign, or at least he was ripped to pieces by the Horde, but Dr. Mahler found him and kept him alive long enough to extract all the data out of his brain. The final transmission DLC all takes place in Jacob's mind, and I personally thought that this reveal was well done, while most people who actually played it didn't like it nearly as much as I did. If I ended up playing a couple more hours of the Callisto Protocol like they did, I guess I wouldn't like it much either. Overall, looking past all the technical issues, I enjoyed my experience with the Callisto Protocol for the first few hours. But soon enough I realized that this title has shallow gameplay and an overly simplified story with barely any scary moments. If you're a fan of the survival horror genre, I'm sure you could get some enjoyment out of this, but for those unfamiliar with that genre, there are several games that I would recommend before even looking at this one. If you made it this far into the video, thank you for watching, and if you like this one, go check out my Resident Evil 2 video because a handful of people watched that one.
Hey! Hey, where'd everybody go? Mahler! Louise! I'm not dead yet. I'm alive. I mean, Jacob's dead, but I'm still alive. This is Josh. Can somebody please let... Whoa! What the fuck happened to my legs? What the fuck happened to my legs? Somebody... Can somebody get me out of here? And bring me my goddamn legs!